Hey guys, BJ the Brave here, back with, well, another episode and part two of FORGECAST. This is episode 10, and if you've just been watching part one over on the Ecclesiacs channel, then we'll be picking up on where we left off. If you haven't watched that yet, I will leave a link down below. I do suggest you go and check that out first. We've just done a major deep dive on the community survey that we put out there and got all of our thoughts on kind of what we thought about that data. As you can probably see in here, I'm joined by Ecclesiarch, I've got Long Tim, and I've got current rank one, or is it rank two player? Barrick. He's in a bit of a war for top spot with Putis at the minute. So welcome back, guys. What I want to do in this section is essentially just kind of like to bring together all what we've just talked about and summarizing the data, is just get some of our thoughts on some of the key changes, key things we'd like to see change in the game, what we think would fix the game or make the game better. And that could be some specific card changes that you've got in mind, or something more generic about the game and the current state of play. All right. So with that said, I'm going to jump in first to Barrick. So Barrick, where do you want to start? What are some of the walk us through? How do we fix Warpforge? How do we make Warpforge even better than it is?
Mm. Well, yeah, as we were talking about a lot in the first segment that you all should go watch, is that there is a bit of a problem with like card variability or variety across the decks, and the kind of like the staleness of metas that come around. Like only one warlord is really like the top 60+% win rate, and then there's a few that fall after. And then almost a lot of warlords kind of fall in the you're not gonna be able to make it on the top 50 with them category. And there was a discussion of buffing warlords, giving them special cards, changing some way the game mechanics work. But honestly, from my experience playing card games, a lot of it comes down to like the larger a game's card pool is, and the more viable playable options, like a card that you can say like, I don't always want this card, I don't want this card in every matchup, but in some matchup I'd be happy to see this card, and that most cards meet that standard between factions. That kind of gives the game like a resilience to new changes, to overpowered things. Is like, yeah, maybe some new content is dropped and there's a super powerful swarm strategy, but luckily we already have in our game, every faction has a tool to eliminate an overwhelming swarm of a lot of small creatures. And like that kind of is already something that happened in Warpforge. We had Scarabs, which is a powerful, scary deck, kill you very quickly with little to no board. But you also, every faction has a cheap, low cost of energy AoE removal spell to deal with that. But
Mm.
we don't have tools across factions to do lots of other important things like single target removal that's efficient, or some semblance of a board wipe. And what we do have, however, in this game are a lot of like useless, unplayed cards that I'm sure whatever metrics that EG has, it will show that these cards are played 0% once the player has found a better substitute for them.
You mean the
Um,
Dire Avenger Exarch doesn't get played?
I would be surprised if I think that's probably avoided in draft as well as constructed. Yeah, I don't think anyone's ever playing that card. But yeah, there's so many of them in the factions, and some of them have like cool art and they have cool lore behind them. It's a shame that some people just like you actively don't want to play this. You want to play any card other than this card in your deck, and a lot of factions have a multitude of cards like this. And so there's been a lot of discussion on the Discord about like fan changes to these cards. So many good ideas put out there, and like the way I see it is, if this card is played like 1, 2, 0%, it can't even hurt to like give it a little buff, like a point here, a point there. Like it literally can't even. It probably, most of them probably still won't see play, but it won't hurt. And maybe on an off chance, one of those cards becomes nichely useful in a situation later down the road where otherwise the game would be broken. But now, hey, this faction actually does have this tool because of this one buff we did a long time ago to this unplayed card. And
Mm.
so I've made a spreadsheet that I shared on the feedback channel on the Discord that anyone is welcome to go and look and comment on. Just starting with like three factions, the Ultramarines, the Eldar, and the Necrons, who I think can benefit from this the most. I don't have a lot of experience with the Orcs or Tyranids, so I didn't feel like I could make some valued as valued contributions on those guys. But these factions, I think they have just been falling off since I started playing the game, and they have like I was saying, so many useless cards, or unplayed, underplayed cards that just with a little tweaking, and now that we have like a very good, um, we have a very good picture for what like a strong, good synergistic faction looks like in the Tau. We can now like kind of move these guys towards that mold, and like the card art is already there, the animation's already there. It's all there for EG to kind of like fix and tweak. And I feel like they've done this in other games, like in Hearthstone. When you look back at like the original cards that were released in their base set, they were like a lot of them were garbage and like unplayable, and then they fix them and tweak them over the years so that some of them still see play in the power creep that goes on in a game after like that after 10 years. So I don't know, before I go into a couple cards I want to see change, any thoughts on that?
Can you see the video? Can you see the video, Barrett? Because I've kind of got some of your changes up now on the screen.
I don't think you're streaming to us on Discord.
Yeah, I think you're not, BJ.
Okay, so basically I am in the Necron. I'm in the Necron one at the minute, so
Okay. Yeah.
Is there an easier way for
Necrons.
me to do this? I don't know.
Well, I'll just if you have them on, if you're showing them on your screen, I can just I have them pulled up on mine,
Yeah,
so I'll just
I've got
talk
your
about it.
Chronomancer as your first one there, wasn't
Oh
it?
yeah, so Chronomancer, this is a great one. I think we were talking a little about this guy in part one. A lot of people in the survey said that Chronomancer desperately needs a rework, a change, not just a buff. I would say like this guy is a legendary. He looks cool. The Necron faction, they have so much cool potential, lore and flavor in their abilities. But I think this guy has always been known as the worst orc knob up until recently, and now he's known as another one of those trash cards that you don't want in your deck. Maybe in draft you take it for even a bad body at that energy, honestly. Um, yeah, this guy. I mean, I didn't screenshot the lore like I did, or the flavor text like I did with some of the others on this document, but like he's talking about how he slows down time for your enemies and speeds up time for his troops. And so that just sounds perfectly like, at least at the floor, this guy should be Orc Knob, maybe a little understated for the cost, but also this idea of removing flank for your enemies. So that way you play this guy down and your opponent goes and tries to play a Howling Banshee. Well, it doesn't have flank anymore. It's lost it until this guy is removed or dealt with. And that just seems like a powerful, unique ability for a legend to have in this very underperforming faction at the moment. Any ideas on that card?
I really like that. I wondered if there's, I don't know, again from a coding point of view, but I wondered if there's a way it could almost say, add flank to a troop in your hand, and and then keep the second part. Like I really love that slowing the opponent down, stopping the flanking. But I wonder whether it's too powerful to have both. Whereas if you just gave flank to one unit of your choice,
Mm-hmm.
which in reality, I mean, if it costs 5 energy, I mean, how many other troops are you playing? Like, what turn are we on here?
Right.
Like that's why it's not a very good Orc Knob anyway, right? Because it's expensive, and Orc Knob can be discounted through things like the Green Horde, so that can go off, whereas this can't really go off in a major way. So I'm missing some, but I love this idea. Using
Yeah.
flank.
Yeah,
And
I
oh,
was just gonna
please.
say huge shout out to you, Barrick. This is like an endeavor that I think is like way more important than people might feel. Like aside from the important piece of like you're getting feedback, you're adding ideas, other people are adding ideas, but it's really shining a spotlight on like there are so many cards that can have potential, that could have a spot, could have a niche, and kind of break out and bring that variety that I think is really important. But if we're always focusing on like nerfing the most powerful stuff, but not really taking a little bit of a microscope here and looking at these card pools and saying like there are 10 to 20 cards that will never see the light of day because all these other lists should have these things. That narrowness is such a killer. And so like being able to do stuff like this and really trying to get the word out and get creativity too, right? Of like the aesthetic and the design that we all love. I just wanted to say that I think it's great that you're doing this work and including people in the community.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was actually pretty enjoyable to stay up late one night making this list too, and I hope to add to it some other factions and get some people's comments in the on the document as well.
Yeah, nice work,
Uh,
Barrett. And the next one I got up on the screen was the Solar Pulse.
oh yeah, this was the last one I entered. It came up after this particularly interesting idea that just like this card still even with the change would always be to taking its core effect blind all enemies, somewhat of a niche tech like meta tech card, right? Like against a lot of decks like orcs, so most of them have high melee, or Tyranids, mostly melee only. Blind them's not going to do anything. But for instance, like right now, tower kind of king, blinding is a premium, is almost like removing, like the drones literally can't attack even if they were a blast 2 missile drone. It doesn't, it just eliminates it for that turn essentially. Um, and so the real problem with Solar Pulse is that like you use it once and then you just wasted forwardage and your opponent still has that board that you have to deal with next turn, right? Well, my idea was to give it a text that you get a copy of the Solar Pulse back at the beginning of your next turn that costs a little more, so it doesn't become like this oppressive strategy you can do forever, but you can reuse it to keep their board blinded. And so this can kind of be create situations like, well, I have Curse of the Pharaon, Scythe Assault in my hand. I just had to stall for 2 turns to get to survive there. And that becomes like an interesting sort of play style. I'm spending all my energy, most of it on Solar Pulse, but I'm going to be able to stall maybe enough against this heavy range deck to survive. However, it's not like a really an oppressive meta warping defining card because like you just run melee decks, melee factions, and that this does nothing, absolutely nothing. So for a common, that seemed like a reasonable change with an interesting bit of flavor for the Necrons.
Yeah, I like it. I'd like to see the one that comes into your hand next turn gain ephemeral, so that it only pulses once. Because I think, like, I don't know, I feel like if it just kept on going, then it almost like breaks card draw, not card draw, card parity a little bit, like, because you just constantly have another card, wouldn't you? But like if it just echoed once, it's almost like a companion for stratagems in a way. Isn't it? Like a
Kind
built-in
of, yeah.
value type of thing. Like, I like
The
it.
idea that it is only blind, so like if you are trying to play this every turn of the game, and your opponent has like 4 units that start getting blind at the beginning, they might start playing some melee stuff and start attacking you with their warlord and melee, or their units with their lower melee value still, while you're spending all like this is getting more expensive each turn. So after 2 times it's 6, after 3 times it's 7, etc. You're not going to be developing any board if you're just playing this all the turn. You're slowly going to get beat down in melee, which might be less effective, but than their range, but. Yeah,
Just
certainly these are all these definitely all can use some tweaking. And maybe like I don't know, think we can go to a different faction for a third one, but I did really want to go over this other Necron one, just because we were talking about combo decks earlier a lot, and I guess you could call some of that chaos stuff combo, and I def Scarab's definitely qualified combo in my mind, and I don't see maybe even like a reclaim the stars turn as inconsistent as it could be considered combo. But as for my idea in card games, combos are often like, with some amount of setup, but mainly with like a well sculpted hand in a somewhat winnable board position, or all right board position, you can kind of win in one turn sort of play style and strategy. And really, to me, that's like kind of all that Scarabs can do, or maybe like Orcs can close out fast with a bunch of proper killy um, and Warlord buffs. But the flayed one, my idea here was just a simple change that instead of having reanimated, give them fat when instead of when reanimated, give them fast at a flank. So that way, this kind of becomes a potential to do direct damage to the enemy warlord if you've banked up enough reanimation tools. Which at the moment there aren't even that many that Necrons have directly in your deck. There's like 4 cards and Resurrection Orb, or four. You can have 4 copies of 2 of them, and then Resurrection Orb. And after that, it's just having to have other units out that are giving you talents in your hand. So that seemed like a somewhat interesting one-turn combo sort of playstyle to diversify Necron's abilities to do different things, but also just fit in an aggro build as well.
yeah, cool. All right, so that was the Necrons, and then You had an Eldar one on here as well.
Oh, that one had my favorite. The Fire Prism was my favorite from
Oh.
all of the things that Barrick did.
Oh, but there's a
I love the idea.
Okay, which one? You tell us which ones you just go with your ones, and I'll try and find it on screen. All right.
One of-
Well, yeah. If
remember?
clearly like a fireplace, I'm happy to talk about that. That was really just like that was one of the times I was just reading the lore, and I'm like, wait, one shot a monolith. This thing can't even tickle a monolith. What? And so and I think it's also introduces a mechanic which addresses a lot of the Eldar's problems at the moment, which is armored units. Like Eldar Shuriken just gets absolutely obliterated by armor. Warp Spider or not warp, the Striking Scorpion Exarch doing 4 damage total to Gaz is a crime. And so because they're so Eldar are so given such an obstacle by armor, I feel like a word like Armor Bane, where you double the damage the troop deals to an armored unit, would really punish the inclusion of armored, while also like being on either expensive, overcosted, or a few number of units would not make it too oppressive of an ability.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of potential for there because there were a lot of people saying that they don't like the armor mechanic, but I love it. I think it's a really cool addition that I really liked compared to HHL where there was no armor. I really like it, and I think it opens up potential for different countermeasures. Like you could have something called Armor Bane that does double damage to it, or maybe you could have Armor Penetration, which would be like something that just ignores armor, doesn't do the extra damage, but it just ignores it, for example. So there could be like so many different ways to just approach it, or something that you could even make like armor thundering from Total Warhammer, which reduces target's armor when you hit it for briefly. Like maybe you attack Gaz and his armor is suddenly reduced by 2
Reduce
until
for
the
the
next
rest of your
turn.
troops, and then you can swing in with everyone else. That would be a terrific tech for against that stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential.
I couldn't find it on there, but yeah, that does sound very very cool. Because the prism's just like full of. It's just this deal 3 damage again, isn't it? It's very vanilla.
It's a worse Crimson Hunter.
Yeah. I found you Wraith Lord. Did you want to talk about that one?
Sure, yeah, that's another a neat idea of the modality concept that they honestly I don't play Tyranids that much, but one of my coolest cards that I think is coolest one is the Carnifex, just because it's giving you this option on this what seems like a rather vanilla body. All of a sudden you have versatility to make this suit your needs, and while usually your need is 1 armor, it can do something else, and that's nice. And so I thought like Eldar, especially the Wraith Lords, they are known for having this massively customizable assortment of weapons and armor and melee weapons and whatnot.
I would
So
love
why
that.
not?
I love this, James. This looks cool. I want to play with this card now. This is great.
Exactly, yeah.
That's really
It's
cool.
like a good high end something else to play on 8 other than your Hemlock, and it's gonna do what you needed to do in the matchup.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's really cool.
if nothing else, like Barrick presents like the lesson of a card can be super mediocre, and when you give it modality and you give it options and flexibility, it does turn into a better card in a lot of ways. And like that's just one design principle that I think could really be explored more. And I'm really glad that that was one of the posts that I had gotten to see and sort of comment on as well. So I just think it's really great to get some creative life flowing for the lesser seen cards.
Yeah,
Sure.
great job. All right, where you want to go next? All right.
I guess the Space Marines. I don't have as many as I thought was many like interesting ideas that I did for the other factions, but more just the line of Space Marines to me. Like they were my first faction I got in Warpforge, but they quickly lost me as well because they just didn't seem to do a whole lot. And to be like the super soldiers of the Imperium, just the stats and the bodies on these units compared to other like orcs or just some like a 2 swarm of Tyranid, trash infantry was so much better than my Space Marine tactical guys. It kind of it didn't really hit the spot for me. And so I feel like just like I was saying earlier, a lot of these just 1 or 2 health or attack or like maybe like Space Marines doesn't have power armor. There was like 1 unit and I think in the whole faction that has armor on it. Like I think some more of these units could benefit from armor, a little better stats, could just make them
Yeah,
like
I like it. I want the
more
power armor
playable.
faction to have some damn armor.
Yeah, I was getting a little sassy there, but yeah, they could use some benefit, also just some more like impactful abilities on the board. I guess here's an interesting one: the Tyrannic War Veteran. This guy seems like he actually has like a high ceiling ability, like he can be really big. But the problem is he's got 3 health. He's gonna die the next turn at range for only dealing 3 damage. Like he's gonna do nothing. So this was kind of like, maybe not super playable as an ability, but if there ever becomes a time where like Tyranids are swarming the board, but also that one big like hive tyrant in the middle, you can smash him in melee with your 9 or 11/3 Tyrannic War Veteran for 3 energy, and that would be like a really nice niche use case for this card that probably not going to see much play.
Yeah, a card just to cut in about the Ultramarines that I was looking at the collection and just saying, okay, at the very least, what I would love to see is something that actually makes me want to build vehicles as like a full archetype. And there's plenty of stuff there. There's plenty of material, but it's not material that competes with like more of the aggressive style, or even potentially that enticing, with Calgar and trying to go later. But a card that I actually really liked, especially even as like a newer player, was Armored Support. And when they had changed that card to be, instead of 2 less, 1 less, right? I think pretty much everyone never touched that card again. And it wasn't necessarily tier 1 anyway. It was something as like you're building your collection. Oh, and this was a principle from another card game I had played, where it was like you can draft things outside of your actual physical deck, right? So that you can pull something that I'm a new player, I don't have, a dreadnought yet, so but I can get that. So I thought from that sort of design standpoint, it had some points for it. But I think about like how they reduced a little bit of the card draw, for from the 3-drop to the 2-drop for Ultramarines, and that started to see more play again. And so I started to think about like, part of the thing that is also missing is like an enabler that really rewards you for going with those sorts of synergies, right? So like for Armored Support, whether it's dropping it down to 2 energy, and making it just that much more efficient, or making it like basically what the Eldar have, right? Draw 2, reduce by 1 sort of feel. There's just stuff, again, it's like, when you have us actually really looking at these cards and like thinking about them and the creativity, but also just kind of thinking about how they slot in against other cards that are similar. It's like, yeah, this thing is overcosted and underpowered, so maybe we reduce the cost, or we increase the power, or both. And that could be a decent option to at least say, actually, maybe I want to go more mid-range with vehicles because that makes more sense. But like, why would I do that when it's not really set up the way to make it competitive enough?
Exactly. And I think as far as vehicles go for Space Marines, Ultramarines, like, I guess there's some vehicles that could, like, I don't know, the Primaris Invader, if that was given flank, or had a condition to gain flank. Maybe that would be interesting if there was some condition that could be met and then it gains flank. Now I actually have some playable 4-drop with high flanking damage, but I have to, have some setup. But I feel like expand, or the reinforcement drop, that would bring like a whirlwind or predator tank, land raider. Like there's obviously some vehicles that aren't even in the game yet that will hopefully enable this very interesting and playable vehicle strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. The bare bones are there, right? Need to strengthen that appetite for sure. Cool. Well, some good card suggestions there, Barry, for sure. Was there anything else from your perspective that you just think you'd really like to see change
Well,
through the game?
yeah, I think, well, so these were suggestions to change, like, I think relatively low-hanging fruit to make the game a lot better in a sooner time period. But I mean, of course, EG has a release schedule, and they have, the new content's going to come out at a certain pace that it will. And I just think, like, I've just players who might be frustrated at the current lack of options, just like have hope, because like as long as things continue going well for the game, they're going to keep adding more cards, and like more cards will make the game better, even if sometimes they're OP for a week or two. In the long run, a year from now, this game will be so much better because there will be such a greater variety of options that make every warlord more playable, that make oppressive decks less oppressive because there are more answers in the format in the card pools. Just like a quick thing I was thinking when we were talking about like giving warlords a special card. For instance, like Anvir, not a great Eldar warlord at the moment, just because his main thing is using his power to generate stones, but that's also a huge loss of tempo every turn. Eldar are the tempo faction, so it's kind of counterintuitive. So it could cost 1 energy, or there could be Eldar cards that benefit you from drawing a card repeatedly. Maybe there's a card that gets +2/+2 every time you draw it from your deck. Oh, so I give it back with Anvir, and then I draw it again. Put it back, and I draw it again, and now at the end of the game, I have this massive unit for 4 or 5 energy that I've drawn 3 or 4 times. If these cards exist to support the powers of the existing warlords and the existing synergies, that makes things far more enjoyable and give us far more options. So I just things are only going to get better as long as they keep adding more cards and keep them, at a playable level of viability.
Some really great suggestions there. Yeah, I really love that, Barry. Please, are you still with us?
Yep.
What are your top things that we haven't talked about yet that you wanna see change?
I have a few ideas only, to be honest. Like, I haven't been thinking much about the specific card changes, but one that I've been saying a lot, and I've actually brought this up when Shuma posted his Tyranid change suggestions. I think one of the problems with Tyranids is that with their I don't even know what that called. Is their adaptability or adaptability, right? So whenever they adapt and they get these new mutations or whatever, some of their options are very good while some of them are very bad. Like, for example, when you're playing biomorphologies, you either want HP, you want armor, or stealth. Vanguard is the option you take if you don't get those 3. And then there's the melee and ranged attack, which is usually not good. And people are often complaining that Tyranids don't have flank, Tyranids don't have hard removal. Why don't they change it so that instead of that melee and ranged attack, you give them 2 extra options? Instead of melee attack, make an option flank, and instead of the ranged attack, make an option on camouflage. And it's still 6 options, so you're not always going to get what you want, but Tyranids in this way would get 2 more interesting options and you would be able to make some units depending on the matchup, you either give your Carnifex armor or camouflage. If you need, let's say, a panic removal, you could opt for flank. So this could give them more room, because that attack and range damage, let's be honest, out of 100 games, you'll only see that used maybe 5 times. I've only seen a person use ranged attack on their Carnifex 1 time only, and that was when they tried to flank it to destroy my what's called again? Oh my god, Doom Scythe. Yeah. So essentially, what I think is that would give Tyranids better options, and what I do want to see is Tyranids going away from the Ravenous Hunter dependability into some more interesting, flexible stuff. And on top of that, you could do some things like maybe give a card draw on the 1 energy flank that they have. There's some small things that you could do for them to make them more reliable and make them actually rely on their adaptability rather than just, okay, I'm gonna slap armor on this or stealth and just gonna one-shot you, or I'm just gonna lose. That's one change that I've been thinking. What's your I have a few more, but what are your thoughts on that one? What do you think? So Tim, let's start from you.
Yeah, no, I like that change. I mean, anything that just widens your options, I think is really valuable. And I think for Tyranids, I was really just thinking about, sort of expanding the card pool in the sense that I remember Shimatsu had said very clearly, he was like, well, I don't run some of these other stealth units because it's just better for me to have the best units and then give them stealth, because that's just going to be more effective. So I started looking at just Death Leaper and Von Ryan's Leaper and some of these other cards that they're not unplayable, certainly, but they also don't do what they're supposed to do well enough. And so it just kind of keeps everything in this little, narrow hallway where you just have to kind of fit the same sort of deck through, and there's really no room for much else. And I think Ecclesiarch, you hit on a really good point of consistency, right? If even it's very narrow, but they can consistently close out the game. They can consistently, like have enough cards or have enough options that even if they're going to be like hyper aggressive or sort of a little bit more one-shotty, that you can do that at a reasonable rate. I think you would need to look at some individual cards to do that, but I really like, the biomorphology is just a really good point of like, why give options that are just far and away worse than other ones, rather than having more good options,
It's
which
not really
creates
an
more
option, is it?
dynamic gameplay. No, right, exactly. It's like you're
Yeah, I
never
mean,
picking.
who's gonna choose the melee attack? Like, who's ever gonna do that? What's the reason for me to ever do that, right? There's zero. Only when I want a panic removal or something that's rare. Plus, if somebody might think at this moment, yeah, but Ecclesiarch, then you do biomorphologies and you give flank to everything in your hand. Well, once again, EG have done that a bazillion times. There's a ton of cards in Horus Heresy Legions that says give flank to all your troops in your hand, and mind you, that's a Night Lord card, and Night Lords have the ability to, whenever they're attacking something with less attack than they do, they don't take retaliation. So imagine them throwing those things down with flank, and well, it's not that frustrating, okay? So it's
I mean, they've just
it's
printed dynamic offensive, right? Which allows you to essentially give not only powerful units flank, but powerful units to have long range with flank.
yeah,
So
that's 3 for 1.
or
good luck beating
crump
that.
the gits, or crump the gits, for example. That's also the thing. Yeah. So that's one change that I definitely want to see, and I'll try to voice it as much as I can. The other one is actually Kato Sicarius, and I've been actually thinking of one thing. What I really don't understand is, why does Kato Sicarius have a talent when he's an Ultramarine and he could have Codex instead? That's one thing that really baffles me. Like, I just don't understand, like, why give him a talent when you are playing a Codex specific faction, right? Why not? And honestly speaking, I've been thinking of this, like, back in the day when I made some suggestions. I was afraid to make this suggestion, but ever since like the Scarboy came out, I've been thinking, why not give Kato Sicarius something like this? Give him a front line so that he's a defensive card, and on top of that, why not give him Codex, give your Warlord 1 armor? Now, some people might blow up, but Ecclesiarch, then with the refill, you're going to give him 3 armor. So you're telling me that you're going to be saving both of your energy refills for Kato Sicarius that comes out at 9 energy? Of course, you're not going to be doing that, but it would be such a decent defense card that you drop a brick front line, which also gives your Warlord armor. Okay, if you're afraid of armor, then just keep it at heal 5 as it is right now, but make it Codex so that Kato Sicarius can instantly apply that. Or if you really want to keep that Greatest Deeds card, just make it added into your hand, sure, but make it Codex. I think it would be totally fine to let Kato like give you armor or heal on your Warlord while also acting as a front line. It would still not be OP because it's a friggin' 9 energy unit. Like, in these card games, 9 energy is too much. When you're playing something like that, it has to be very good. It has to be very good. So yeah, I think that would be a great change for Sicarius, because it really sucks seeing that guy not being useless. Like, come on, what? What's the point of making a named character like that so useless? That's one.
And not to pile on too much, because I know like things are just going to develop, and cards that came out earlier, right? Like there's less fuel for the fire. They have maybe more basic things or whatever. But just talent itself is problematic in the game.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's a tempo based game where you're clearing, you're controlling the board, all of those things. You're always considering that. In most of the videos I've ever made about like how to get better at the game, it's like, think about how you're going to clear that unit this turn. So, to pivot a little bit to chaos, although it's not like they need so much help, but the sorcerers that have some like really cool abilities, you're never going to play them, or you're going to play them and you're never going to see them. So I just think that this idea of like, this card has raw card advantage stapled to it, but you can't get it because this game is really based around tempo. There's something has got to shift about that, or whether it's like an overall fix to the idea of talent, or whether you you just get that card in your hand, right? Which is kind of the easy fix. But I would like to see something a little bit more interesting than that. But I do think that like going through the talent cards in the game and really being like, okay, we're at a different level now. Like what can this actually mean for these different units and things like that? I would really love to see that sort of change.
Yeah, it's like it gives you a meaningful change and it makes control Ultramarines a thing because you have this big unit that supports your control mechanic and gives you survivability. Speaking of which, I have like two more. One is Iskandar Kaon, and let me tell you, like the laziest change that they have done is giving Iskandar shield. Like, what does that even do? Like, you're giving a win more card even more win more, because let's face it, Iskandar is a win more card. If I play Iskandar and you cannot punish me for it, it means I'm already winning the game. And what, now I have shield, so I'm winning even more? Iskandar, its problem is essentially the fact that it's a meme because it has such a ridiculous ability. Like it's an ability that is RNG and it's also like stupidly strong, but it's only strong if you manage to pull it off. Why don't they do something else instead? Just remove that shield, it's not necessary. And instead, this is what I would do. I've been thinking of many different options for Iskandar, and I actually have two. In any case, it has to be a rally, not a talent. One would be to choose a Black Legion tactic and just add it to your hand, and maybe it costs 2 less. That's one. But I think it would be more interesting to do this. Like, you could have rally and talent, and instead of that, you could have choose a Black Legion psychic power, add it to your hand, and it costs 2 less. Now, that would be very interesting. You know why? Because it would essentially give you the powers from Sylar, because that's the Black Legion psychic powers. So when you drop Iskandar, one option is that you can give him camouflage for free, basically, which would make him stick. The other option is if you have a big board, wide board with chaos, you could drop him and give demonic strength just as a finisher, like Onva. It's basically Onva's ability, but +2 to melee. Or the third option could be maybe you just do like this extra damage on the enemy warlord to just finish him off. So this would make him so interesting, and every turn that he would stick, he would give you more psychic powers. So why not give him something like that? It would actually make him more viable. He will still not be that strong, by the way, with that ability, because it's still slow. Like, yeah, should give him camouflage, but if I kill you, then it doesn't work, right? But on the other hand, he could also act as a front line. You drop him, and with the psychic power, you give him Vanguard. So there's so much opportunity if you just give him that. And nobody can say it's going to be OP because it's 9 energy. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic card to go off. What Tim has been saying is that like the versatility of a card kind of speaks to its at least viability in some archetypes. And I mean, just the point that even being able to pick between the front line and the camo on a big body that is going to give you more value later on in the game, that's already like pretty playable, I would think, if you can get up to 9 energy, of course. But then also having the niche of the finisher or some random ping damage. I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, because not only are you getting the whatever psychic power you want, but you're also getting the free random card that he's going to generate if he keeps his ability, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or is it with no artifice? Is your change just rally and
rally and talent? Rally and talent, so that like basically it gives you one like instantly, and then it generates one at the end of every turn, like at the start of every turn. Sorry. So if it sticks, it gives you more and more.
Oh, more psychic powers.
Yeah. So essentially, you get one at the start of every turn that this guy survives.
Is the one that you get at the beginning of the turn, is that random or is that chosen?
No, it's chosen because it would give you like a talent and you would choose one. So for example, like they could give him something, name it something. He's a friggin' psyker that supposedly is like super strong. So yeah, they could think of something for there. So I think that would be much more interesting. Like, what the heck? Who needs that shield, man? Like, what does it do? What does that do? That's like the worst change I've seen in a while.
What is it good for?
And there's the final one. This one's questionable. BJ knows about this one, but I'm gonna actually still say it.
Please don't.
It's the Avatar of Cain.
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna say move the armor from the.
I was saving that for the final honorable mention, but with the Avatar of Cain, I had this idea, but that one was received very poorly by people who saw it. Everybody panicked. But what I thought was that you could like remove the current like stupid shenanigans that Avatar of Cain has, and instead of that, you could give him a very destructive rally. You could give it is it could have destroy every other troop on the battlefield when you play it, and for every enemy troop that you've destroyed, deal 2 damage to your warlord. So, like the inspiration where I got that, there used to be this card in HHL called Targutized Sacrifice. It was a 5 energy tactic for White Scars. It basically said return every card on the battlefield into the deck. They cost 0, and your warlord takes 2 damage for every unit you've returned, like enemy unit you've returned to the deck this way. So it's a panic removal tool, but it deals a lot of damage to your warlord. Now imagine if somebody plays Will of Gork and you have to clear it with the Avatar. Suddenly you're dealing 16 damage to your warlord, right? So it's not per se something that could tip the scale so badly. But if there's like one enemy unit on the board, you deal 2 damage to your warlord and you take that unit out, but you no longer have that talent on top that buffs your warlord like crazy. And Avatar could finally be playable, and it kind of does make sense as well, like, you know, this Avatar of Kyla Minsha Kane. So kind of makes sense. Because I think in a sense they should not be afraid of making cards like that, you know, like something that's very strong when it comes to 9 energy. Like, come on.
Don't you think, Ecclesiastes, the main issue with that is it would stand out like a sore thumb then, wouldn't it? Like, if they're going to do that, I agree, like, those expensive troops are so underpowered and they need to be much more impactful. But I think then you'd need to do that with, like, you know, all of them. There's a load of those, isn't there? Monolith, Tyrannofex in the Tyranids, Stomper in the Orcs. Like, all those others would seem like pitiful. So I know he's a legendary, so maybe you could start there, but
down the line they need to do it for all of them, because
Yeah.
one of the main complaints of people is they hate the vanilla cards, something that the Tau don't struggle with, because
Yeah.
Riptide Battlesuit is super cool. Like
very cool.
because it has like cool stuff. It has dynamic offensive combo. So yeah, with the Avatar is just like, I think that Iskandar and Kato changes are much more like safe. But I think they could do something like that with the Avatar, or instead of removal, it could just say deal 5 damage to all units on the battlefield, including your units as well. So it's something, or if you don't want units, because then that would be too much damage by the Eldar, make it troops. So somehow make this Avatar, when he just drops, he does some damage so that it actually does something. Because that talent is like, what do? You drop a unit that has like low HP but some armor, and then next turn he asks you for even more Spirit Stones. So you need to pay Spirit Stones to give it blast, which is not a big deal. And then next turn you have to pay even more Spirit Stones to activate that talent. You know what's funny for me? The fact that if you have Spirit Stones, this Avatar is gonna sap it to get the useless blast, and you no longer have extra Spirit Stones to actually activate his talent next turn for extra. So it's like so self-sabotaging. It's crazy. And while last but not least, of course, move the armor from the Venom Crawler to the Terminator, and you can decrease the stats on the Terminator instead. You could decrease the ranged attack, would make sense, because in the art it's just breaking the wall with his power fist. So make it high melee, low range, give it 1 armor. And remove that friggin' armor for the Venom Crawler. It's unfair as hell that Venom Crawler has that. And this is coming from a Chaos player, so yeah.
Tim, rescue us.
Sorry, what was that? Should we remove the armor? I didn't catch that.
So I've been like whining about that forever.
You've just had this great idea, haven't you, Tim? What we could do in Chaos.
Yeah, sorry, Ecclesiarch, I gotta cut in here. No, I love having this discussion. It's really just, it's important. It needs to be had. I also have so many gripes about 9 drops. Like, no one's playing them. There's no reason to. So, you know, that's a really good point. I mean, I think most things have been said about like what I would want to improve about the game. I mean, I think just to kind of shift a little bit more towards, you know, the general feeling. It's, you know, I want to see buffs. I want to see buffs to cards that literally have never touched like the light of day. And like I was even thinking about, I'll just give one brief example with the Necrons. You know, like I really want Frenzy to be a thing. So I was like, okay, they buffed the Canoptek Plasma guy, like the 2-drop, right? Like they were like, oh, now it comes in with more melee or ranged. I can't remember. but like the unit's like absolute garbage itself. So, you know, I was kind of thinking, okay, what if that unit actually just had a better stat line, like it was 2-2-3, right, instead of 1-1-3, which is just like horrendous, or even a little bit more. You know, then you're like, oh, this is kind of like an aggro enabler that itself is like a decent aggro card. You know, so I'm sure there are like plenty of examples, but yeah, I just want to see buffs to cards that are not like have like a sign on them in the format, whether that's through nerfs or whatever else. I just want to see more variety, which speaks to my second point, which is varieties in playstyle, right? I love playing aggro, and this speaks to a greater criticism. I really struggle to play anything that's not aggro or tempo on the leaderboard because of how grindy it can be to be on there, which I think is more of a critique of like something probably needs to change about the leaderboard or like high rank system because it just you sort of hit a wall with it. I think like for me, I really lose motivation at the end of the season, and I try to kind of push through it, but it's you know I would want it to be more fun, whether it's like you're not as punished in certain ways or I don't know. I just feel like there needs to be a little bit of a look with the ranked system and just being able to have more variety, which I think just helps everyone, you know, with the warlords, and that's why I really pointed out that point in our data talk earlier. I think that's like a really important point, so that someone can opt into aggro mid-range control. Obviously, I would love for there to be a combo, you know, option for at least a couple factions if you can't do it for each one. But at baseline, if you can have a functional aggro mid-range control deck, it's just like you've got enough flavors for everyone.
Yeah.
And I think that just really would be important for the game for me.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Tim. I do think it's one of the weaknesses of Warpforge that there's not enough variety and flexibility to be able to that exist, and those archetypes don't exist. You know, it's very difficult, and it's one of the reasons why I don't want to see the armor get nerfed from the orcs, because I actually think that has enabled a true like control archetype. I think Blizzard's idea about having things like anti-armor units is a much better way to go. So yeah, no, I love that. Did you have any other thoughts on any other changes?
I mean, I had written a couple for each faction, but we actually touched on I think almost
A lot of them.
all of them. I did want to shout out that little thing about the sorcerers because I'm like that's kind of a vibe that I like with chaos. But yeah, no, I think we discussed plenty that really would, you know, shake things up at the very least, and I think that's what we need. We need at least a shake up, if not, you know, some potential, you know, new challengers at the very least.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I think that's like the main change I had wanted to see is more variety in the archetypes and things like that. Very quickly, in like less than 90 seconds, I'm just going to whiz through a very small handful of specific changes that I had. I think Longstrike could do with being reduced to Markalite 2 to 3. I'd love to see the Ravener in Tyranids get flank. I think the Stealth Drone in Tau could maybe only give stealth to the unit next to it and not come with stealth itself. Now, I don't know how that sits in theme, but in terms of for a 2-cost drop, I think that's perfectly reasonable for a flyer that has two health. I think that would, and it would stop this endless chain that I know Barrick will love abusing, where we get stealth for like 4 turns in a row. But I really think it's a bit OP for the 2 cost at the minute. The Dreadnought, I've already said before, but I think the AoE on the Dreadnought should do 2, not 1 to 2 damage. I think having Storm Raven on a stick is pretty good. The Monolith is too iconic to be completely unplayed. I'd really love to see it deploy 2 Necron warriors that come with Vanguard. I think that's in theme. If you look at the model, you know, the idea is that it can teleport Necron warriors out. I used to say Praetorian Guards, but that might be too much. But I think 2 Necron warriors that have Vanguard would be really cool, and it would mean that when you play the Monolith, it actually has an impact, because it's a bit like the Grot Mob puts a couple of blockers down. And the last one for me would be the Tau Storm Surge, which is the big pile of crap that costs 10 energy. I think one very simple change that I really want on that would definitely make me go and play it is change it from vehicle to battlesuit. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all I want. Just make it battlesuit, and I am definitely doing a late game battlesuit heavy like deck with riptides and storm surges and dynamic offensive and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, yeah, that was it for me. Yeah, so cool. So we've laid out quite a lot between the feedback and the changes. Everyone, if you're a EG employee, you're probably sitting with a migraine at the minute, listening to all this, a bucket of coffee and some ibuprofen or something. But you know, this is all just, you know, I would say that this is all just like, it's all just information. It's fun, but no one's expecting that all of this stuff is going to happen. I guess we just hope that it's been heard and, you know, it's helpful. You know, like even if like 5-10% of this happens, then it's gonna help improve the game. So yeah. All right, guys, very quickly, just before we all sign off, just wanted to say we've just had this big announcement that's launched today about the way in which reinforcement drops come into the game. And it seems like with Chaos, and I say seems like because I have read it about 3 times and I'm still getting my head around it, to be honest, but it seems like that we're going to have a new way of doing reinforcement drops. Now, the exciting part about that is that we're going to bring in this kind of idea of an event that's going to probably take about 2 weeks, and that even free-to-play players can kind of get involved and they can kind of build some collection and get some cards free from the new stuff. So that's really great. But I did want to get your initial reaction because we got this very lengthy statement and it's a little bit unclear and a bit convoluted, and let's be honest, on Discord the reaction hasn't all been positive. So Ecclesiarch, do you want to kick us off on this one? Like, what are your thoughts after this about this announcement, or what's your immediate kind of reaction to it?
Well, I have some mixed feelings. I mean, as for the drops itself, the cards seemed very interesting. I was very hyped because it seemed to be like a very good anti-Tau thingy, something that helps you deal with the Tau. I like the Warlord, I like the 3-drop and everything, but what really ruined it for me was, as I mentioned in part 1, I don't see why these cards had to be a part of the raid, because once again, it strikes me at the moment of something that's rushed or a little bit lazy, because I love the raid idea. As I said, like I had mentioned it multiple times to BJ that soon they're gonna do this because we've hated it in HHL. They're gonna do it, and they did it. But suddenly, what happens is that you take something that you did for every other faction before this, well, 2 factions, but still, which was giving them 12 cards, and now you're saying I'm gonna give you 7 cards, but everything else is gonna be available through the raid. And if you guys don't complete it, then well, sorry, but it's not gonna open. So that means that you're basically considering the fact that if that happens, it means that you left one faction with less reinforcements than the other. It means that EG are like, okay, it's safe to say that everybody's gonna do it and it's gonna succeed. But what if it doesn't? So that's the thing. It's if it doesn't succeed and people don't do the raid, which I don't think is gonna happen. But if it does happen, that would mean you suddenly have Chaos at a disadvantage because they got less cards than everybody else. Even if those cards are maybe not that good, they have less cards. And I think what they, as I've said, what they should have done is made all of those cards available. And instead, what they could do, something pretty cool, is maybe they could do an alternative art, because in HHL they used to do a lot of alternative art. And maybe like there's a ton of Dark Apostles in the lore, right? And you have Galorn, and maybe instead of that guy, you could have a different Dark Apostle skin. So when you choose Galorn, you can choose the other persona. It was the same thing in HHL. They even had one knight actually not only change the skin, one Night Warlord actually changed the character. It was it was the same with Dupain. I remember you could choose Dupain or another traitor Auxilia character. So it's like it's a cosmetic thing, but it could be fun. Like, yeah, you want like to have a cool skin with cool voice lines, then we'll do this. You could get an avatar, or they could introduce the first ever neutral card to this game, which could be anti-stun or anti-stealth, like the card that I dropped today in our chat, like Pi Alpha, that healed and removed stun. So this was such a great opportunity, and I think they kind of wasted it. Not to say I won't play it, or of course I'm going to play it, I'm going to collect it. I love the cards, but Nevertheless, I think this could have been done much, much better, is what I want to say. So I don't think it's going to do any harm per se, because everybody's still going to do it, and the cards are going to be there, and probably the most important cards are going to be available. But it's just that the harm is that the players are going to see through that easily. It's kind of lazy. That's my comment.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I feel like there's a lot to unpack, but to try and keep it brief, I think, we were waiting for an announcement. We didn't know exactly when it was going to come, but it seemed to come at least like maybe a full day later than we thought. So there was like a little bit of hype, but also kind of, is anything coming? And then we get a very kind of wordy, lengthy news post that you really do have to read it like 2 or 3 times to make out all the different pieces. And I think that's always going to be a tough sell, right? Because no one should have to read an article 2 or 3 times to figure out what's happening. And so that's kind of the initial issue. And then, yeah, really going back to the statement we all have talked about it, of like, and if you don't do this, these will not be added to the collection, however many cards it is. As it's sort of like buried at the end of the article, and then after it's like, get ready, to play. It's like, that's a really weird tone, right? To sort of say like, hey, well, as long as you don't, if you don't do it, you won't get them in the collection, which is like completely counterintuitive to what the reinforcement drops have been. But also go have fun and do it. And it's like, yes, we're gonna go play it. It is the first time. It's cool. It's new. And I to Ecclesiarch's point, like, I was hoping we would get something like this kind of thing. But yeah, it does feel like, oh, we kind of combine these two concepts, and we're kind of like testing it. And I hope that we all kind of learn from this. But I had actually even browsed some of other people's reactions, and someone was like, well, what if the legendary card is the last one to unlock? Right? Like,
Yeah,
I don't want to think.
That's what I think it's going to be as well.
I don't want to think about what ifs like that. Like the potential pressure that maybe comes with something like that is not really a tone that I, as even a person who plays this game quite a lot and talks about, makes content, like, I don't love that concept, and I don't think that it's a great thing for the community to have to even wonder about if I'm going to access one of the most important cards from this reinforcement drop.
And even me and Barrick, who are secretly in a closet Tau players, hoping that it never sees the light of day and we reign supreme. We probably even agree that it's like a really bad thing generally for the game to do that.
Yeah, like, I definitely don't want this to be like a precedent. It really, I mean, if the article had been reworded, condensed, and that whole bit about things being gone forever just totally erased from existence, I think we have a really positive announcement, and with some clarity that basically is them telling us, hey, we're bringing out a live community event where it's going to give you all some free stuff. You get new cards for free. Spend $0. Like, people love it when they're giving stuff for free, and that's what this is in essence doing. And like, hey, play, have fun, collect all the cards, and at the end of the event, if you didn't finish the event collecting stage, they'll be available in the packs. Go at it. That's like a 9 out of 10 response, and they just had to get a little weird with it for whatever reason. And I mean, there's going to be the response that there is because of that. But I think, like everyone has said so far, in effect, at the end of the day, things are probably going to pan out just fine. Everyone will get all the cards, and they'll learn their lesson for the next reinforcement drop, and it will go off more smoothly.
Yeah, let's hope so. So it seems like, in a nutshell, then, guys, and please chip in and tell me if you read it differently. It seems as though, basically, from tomorrow when this goes live, we are going to be able to collect medals by playing games in ranked or draft, and we'll be able to spend those medals to unlock essentially points against a community point pool, and once we reach a certain milestone, that will unlock a card. Now we can probably put some money into getting a premium version of the campaign, which will just give you 1,500 medals up front, which will probably enable you to buy the new Warlord and play that immediately. So if you're just looking at that new Warlord and going, when can I get my hands on this guy and build a deck? You probably can do that if you pay for the premium, but we don't know how much that costs. Am I right so far?
Yes, I think everything you said
Yeah.
is what I've gleaned from the post.
Outside
Is
of
it
that,
draft though? My one question was,
I
is this
don't know if it
ranked
was
or
draft.
unranked?
Yeah, it might
I
have
think
been
it's
ranked.
ranked or unranked only.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
they've said.
Yeah.
They didn't. I believe it's been clarified. It's not practice.
Yeah, so it
I
has
don't
to
know
be
about that.
ranked or unranked, which obviously could mean you do it against AI. Or they did say that it's basically about a couple of games a day on Chaos, to give us an idea of how much we're going to need to play. But it does seem like, based on what they said, that you can't just buy the cards. That you will need to unlock them. So you're probably not, even with the premium campaign, you're probably not going to get all the cards to start with. And it also sounds like only 3 of them are kind of locked behind this. If the community doesn't achieve X, then they'll never see the light of day. It seems like there's only 3 cards that are under threat, if you like, of that happening, and that there are about 7, including the Warlord, that are pretty safe. Like you will get these. Yeah, so that's what it sounds like we've got to do. Do you think, Ecclesia? Have we got that? Have we got that right?
Yeah, pretty much. I think it's like, honestly speaking, it's still too early to say what they're gonna do and how. They might even make some last minute changes. But it would actually be pretty funny to have a little tug of war, people trying to interfere with the cards being. You know what? Once again, like if this was about a neutral card, I would definitely love seeing how, like, people on one side and the other. You know what we usually would have? I just tell you guys quickly. When there was like a draft in Legions, there were like 2 warlords. There were only a set amount of warlords available. Let's say 3 warlords that were on one side and 3 warlords that were on the other side. And every time when you would win with a warlord on one side, they would get like points. And there were like whichever warlords would have the highest, whichever team would have the highest amount of points at the end of the draft month, a specific card would unlock. And sometimes we even unlocked warlords like that. Like there was a choice that you could get Fabius Bile, or there was another guy. And because Chaos won, let's say like that, we unlocked Bile. Something like that would be so cool. Like, let's say either you unlock the vulnerability card for Chaos, or maybe something else. That would be so cool. But instead, we got a pretty linear one. But I think they're gonna learn, and perhaps the next time they'll actually take this into consideration and they'll do something different.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what the little extra bits that we unlock are, because it looks like they're putting in probably some resources and potentially even a new card by the looks of things. So there could be some cool little nuggets in there, and it could be quite fun to feel like we're collecting and unlocking. So let's see. We'll see how it goes. It's out tomorrow. We'll all have our hands on it, and we'll probably be able to make more sense of it, and then we can kind of recap when we get back together. But listen, guys, I want to say a massive thank you to you guys for coming on and making episode 10 an epic one. I think we've done about 4 hours in total. It's been pretty mad, pretty late here, so I'm literally apologise if I'm falling asleep in the chair. Got my pajamas on and everything. Massive thanks, obviously, to you, Barrick, and to you, Long Tim, for putting up with us and for joining us and giving your thoughts. It does feel a bit more like we've got a bit more of a rounded view on all these subjects with having more of us, so that's pretty cool. And yeah, obviously let us know, guys, in the comments what you think. There's lots of content to go on there that we've just discussed. Love to get your thoughts. Join the discussion. Let us know in the comments. EG often do watch FORGECAST, so if you are watching, guys, you know, we've said all of this with the best of intent, and we only want the game to be to go forward in a positive direction. So take it in that vein. And yeah, if anyone leaves further comments, obviously the devs might be able to read them there. Like and subscribe if you haven't gone and watched Ecclesiarch's channel, where obviously we did part 1, then please go back and do so now. And yeah, until the next one, we'll see you on the, well, I guess hopefully on the ladder or unranked mode, probably in the next in the next 2 weeks specifically. Take it easy, guys.